Hello, congregation, and welcome back to the Unveiled Podcast. Today, I'm sitting with Robby Sarvis, my better half, as we are going to tell our foster care journey for the Attached series. But before we get there, you may have noticed that the podcast has gotten an upgrade. So I'd like to say thank you to Chase Adams, who told us exactly what to get, exactly what to buy, so that the podcast sound would sound so much better. And so far as we can tell, it really does sound a whole lot better. But let's get to today's podcast. Welcome to the Unveiled Podcast. Okay, so Robert, as most people know you, I'm so glad to have you here today. I've been doing these podcasts for over a year now, but we've just started doing the Attached series this May. But even before then, our story has kind of been sprinkled in and out of the deep dives that Pastor T and I do. And then the past 2 weeks, as I've recorded these foster care journey podcasts, I've told a little bit of it too. But I wanted to get your perspective because you did not wake up one day and say, let's be foster parents. You know, you're the typical guy, the typical dad that was like, you want to do what? What are we going to do? So I wanted us to tell our story and really to hear your perspective so that those out there who, you know, are thinking the same thing that you are thinking, oh, what the heck? Why do you want to do this? Can kind of hear that too. So do you want to start our story?
I would love it if you would start off our story.
This is kind of how our relationship goes. But anyway, so we started fostering technically in 2022, but becoming a foster parent can be a longer process depending on how motivated you are. You know, there's all kinds of different factors, what agency you're with. But we started the process in late 2021. Now, I had wanted to foster since I was probably in the end of middle school, high school. I had a good friend of mine growing up that her parents were foster parents, and I just always thought it was so interesting and thought to myself, maybe I want to do that someday. And Robby remembers, and I guess I kind of remember us talking about it when we were dating, and I'm glad you didn't go screaming, running for the hills. Really. But yeah, I don't think I remember that specific conversation, but you remember us at least talking about it.
Yeah, I don't remember a specific conversation. Like one doesn't spring to mind, like, you know, we were sitting in a Panera or something. But I just remember we were talking about this earlier today, and I was thinking back, and I remember just like either it coming up in conversation or something like that, it's always a surprise when your significant other comes to you and says, hey, I've been thinking about it and praying about it, and I really feel like I'm being called to be a foster parent. And it's like, okay, that's a lot. But, you know, I feel like I do remember a little bit of a conversation or, you know, just to talk about like, you know, that is something that you felt that you wanted to, or maybe I'm thinking of like, you know, I remember at one point, you mentioning, you know, wanting to adopt from a foreign country. Who knows? You know how guys' brains work sometimes. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't completely off the wall, just like 75% off the wall. Yeah. You know, when you came.
You didn't go running, so I mean.
Well, I mean,
you're still here.
We already had one, so it was.
Well, yeah, and let's get into that. So we definitely, when we got married, wanted to get pregnant pretty quickly, mm-hmm. and our daughter was born before our first marriage at like. Not even a month before our first marriage anniversary. And so we got really busy, obviously, with having one child. It was during COVID. But I do want to talk about this for a second because I suffered severely from postpartum depression. And so the idea of having another child biologically scared the daylights out of me. I mean, that's a whole nother story for a different day, but it really was something that I didn't know that I would ever want to have any more biological kids because postpartum with Avery was so dark. And when we first got married and I told him we were pregnant, you know, surprised him.
I was so scared.
He did such a great job of like, oh, sweetie, that's so sweet. But I could tell that he was also terrified. I mean, as anybody would be. Very also, he's an only child. Like, he didn't know that he wanted more than one child. So at this point, what were you thinking? Like a year after Avery's born, what are your thoughts as far as having more children?
I think it was, a year. Was it a year when I was telling you about it earlier?
Yeah, that's what I want you
okay.
to tell, because it's kind of telling this part of the story.
So a year and some change after Avery was born, you get through the newborn stage. She starts sleeping through the night. Things start looking up, at least for me. I know Mallory was struggling with postpartum depression and, going through that, fighting that battle. But for me, I realized how much I loved, that process and having kids and stuff like that. And I had just recently switched jobs, and we were so excited, and then it came around that basically it wasn't financially feasible for us. It wasn't wise of us to try and have another of our own. And I was a little bit crushed. And then I remember one time going up to the day school for something. I couldn't even tell you what it was. It was just, remember being up there for an event, and it felt like every other gal that was there was pregnant, and it just crushed me, because that's what I wanted at that point. For whatever reason, I was like, I was ready to have another one. We talked about it a little bit, and I wanted to have another one, and it just wasn't going to happen. And it crushed me that, it was like, it's just kind of rubbing your face in it, like there's all these gals that are pregnant, and, that's not going to be us for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. And this is not to say that we started fostering because we wanted to have another child and this was just the way to do that.
No.
It was just kind of the opening, though, like, okay, here's this roadblock. We cannot have any more children because of the job change. And mentally, I was not ready to give birth to another child and deal with all those hormones. But fostering had always kind of been in the back of at least my mind. And so I remember one day I was listening to a podcast and led me down a rabbit hole of a different podcast. I got on this podcast, and it was of this family who had started fostering. And their situation was similar but different to ours. They could not have any biological children at that point, and they knew that at some point they wanted to foster. And I remember listening to this podcast and just thinking, God, you are speaking right to me. But you got to speak right to Robby, because I don't know that he is going to be so gung-ho about fostering at least as much as I am. And so I remember I went home and I was like, I'm going to have this conversation with Robby. And I went up the stairs, and you may have been on like lunch break or something. And I told you, hey, I think we should get some more information about fostering. And to my surprise, you did not completely shoot it down. You were like, okay, let's get some more information. And I think to Robby that meant like, okay, we got some time. But to Mallory that meant green light, here we go.
It was definitely a stalling tactic
at
the time.
Didn't work at all. Because I walked down the stairs. It was during nap time, got online, searched, did a couple of like contact us things. And within 20 minutes, I had a phone call with one of the housing specialists or housing developers through our agency that we use, SJRC. And that was that. And I remember walking up the stairs, I had a page of notes to give to Robby.
I was terrified. When she walked in and had an entire page of notes, I went, what did I just agree to? Mm-hmm. I thought I did a stalling tactic. Apparently that was not the case.
No, you gave me the green light. So that was in October, very end of October.
Yep.
Now, typically our agency was telling us you can expect about 6 months from beginning to end to be licensed at that time. We were licensed at the very beginning of January. Again, because at least I was gung-ho. Robby, of course, came on board or we would not be here, but we were not going to be taking the whole 6 months. I mean, we did as much as we possibly could. There were a couple of in-person trainings that we knocked out in like 2 days. And I just remember being like, we got to get this done. We got to get this done. We got to get this done.
There's even a Friday training, I remember.
Yes, I forgot about that.
It was on a Friday, but it was remote.
A Zoom. Mm-hmm.
A Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I forgot about that. That one was really telling. But anyway, so I want you to take over where we get to the final home study, where they come and check the house out, and then from what happens there to our first placement.
You're asking me to remember these things?
Oh, come on.
I mean, I don't.
A lot of people are scared about a home study. If you don't know what a home study is, it's where they come and check out your house and make sure that you're okay to have kids in your house.
I mean,
foster kids in your house.
It's probably telling that I don't really remember the specifics of that all that much. As in, like, it wasn't. I think you have to be prepared and be okay with the idea that somebody's going to go through and they're allowed to like open drawers and look in cabinets and go to your bathroom, go peek into your, under your, sink cabinet in your bathroom, go look at your closet. Like basically it's like having a 2-year-old wandering around your house with, they're
Things
allowed
they
to
have
get in.
check off.
Yeah. And so I think for some people, I'm sure that can be, a turn off that they don't want to deal with somebody or they don't feel comfortable with that, which is fine. It's to each their own. But I think for some people, it's a surprise. It's different when, it's a forewarning, like, hey, that's part of the process that they have to do that versus a surprise. I'm here and I'm going to go look through your stuff. I think, those are two very different situations.
Right.
And so I think it's important to point that out that like, yes, they will go through stuff and they will look through things and just.
And it is not to pry. It is not to, what's in your drawers? It is simply to check off the boxes that they have to check off to make sure that by the state of Texas's guidelines, your home is ready for a foster child.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I know we'll get to advice later, but the best piece of advice is like child lock pretty much every single cabinet. And I mean, every single cabinet in our house is child locked at this point because it's easier that way, right? Like we can get into it. The kids don't really need to get into it. And that way it's safe. There's not a chance of like, oh, well, I accidentally stashed cleaning chemicals in this cabinet that doesn't have a child lock. Well, every single cabinet has a child lock, so it's safe.
Right.
Because it's in a cabinet. And so there's just, but yeah, back to the home study. I remember her coming, but I feel like I remember something about, she said that like we breezed through it, I feel like. And I think she even said something to that effect that we got through it pretty easy. There weren't any
We had done
issues.
a lot of research.
We'd done a lot of research and we took very seriously the like, they give you here's what you need to do. Here are the things you need to have done. And we, checklisted that thing and got it knocked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was getting that done. We got the paperwork done on that. Green stamp home study looks good. Then got the, okay, cool. We'll let you know when.
It'll be about a week before everything goes through and you're officially approved.
Yeah, exactly. So we're like, cool. All right. We got a week and then we'll know. And then we'll start getting calls after that at some point. Who knows? Funny enough, that's not precisely the order it happened. And they got the cart before the horse. It was a Wednesday.
It was a Wednesday. So she came on a Friday and she's like, it's going to be about a week. Well, that Sunday, both of us or just me? There was one point where we both had COVID, but I think maybe this one was just me.
Yeah, I think it was just
I had
you.
COVID. I popped positive for COVID on a Sunday night.
Yeah. And so maybe it was
Wednesday.
2 weeks because I feel like it was a little bit longer. I don't remember. Whatever. It was later on. Mallory gets a call from a number you didn't recognize.
In California.
And didn't answer it, of course, because who answers numbers from different states?
That you don't have saved, yeah.
Yeah, that you don't have saved. And so she, lets it go to voicemail, whatever, and looks at the voicemail and it says, "Hi, I'm your new caseworker. Please answer the phone call." And so you called her back and she said, we've got a baby for y'all. And Mallory told her, we didn't know we were licensed at this point. She's like, oh yeah, no, y'all are licensed. Y'all are good to go.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Can you take this 1-year-old?
Yeah. And Mallory told her, unfortunately we still got, I've got COVID, we're not clear protocols, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Not a problem. And then that Friday, we decided, we got a wild hair up, said we're going to repaint the cabinets in the kitchen.
We had been locked up in the house for a week.
Yeah, we've been cooped up in the house for a week, so give us a break there.
We were like climbing the walls at that point.
Yes. And so we decided so we had everything out of the cabinets, all this, and, had everything taped off. And Mallory was driving down to Victoria to take Avery to stay with grandparents so that we could, focus on the painting project without having a little almost 1-year-old in the house.
Almost 2-year-old.
Almost 2-year-old. 1 year, 2 year, same difference. And she's on the way down there, and I'll let you tell this.
I get a call, And I had our case manager listed as her name and then in parentheses in caps, always answer. I'm like,
You
close.
still have it that way.
Yeah, I do. And she said, well, we've got a baby that's coming out of the NICU and we have to find a place for them tonight. Can I submit your home? And now we've talked about this. I was talking about this with Pastor T, that when you get that first call, it's always everything that you've ever thought of that you're going to ask goes out of your brain. You're like, yeah, definitely. Sure. And so exactly that happened. I didn't call Robby because I knew we had some like, okay, if they call for this, we're going to automatically say yes. Or if they call for this and this is the situation, it's a no. And so I said, yeah, go ahead and submit our home study. Didn't ask any questions. I don't think I asked anything. And she was like, okay, great. I'll let you know. Well, as is with the foster care system, it's very much hurry up and wait. Like you answer the phone call and you answer as fast as you can because you are on this, like sometimes it's first come, first serve. Sometimes it's what county is the child in. Sometimes it's, they are looking at your home study. They submit your home so that whoever is making the decision can see how many kids are in the home. Where is your home located? Are you a full-time worker? Are you a part-time? All kinds of different things go into this. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to find out really soon. And it seemed like waiting. I drove Avery down to my parents' house and then drove all the way back and still had no idea if this baby was coming to us. Didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. I mean, I knew nothing. She finally calls back and says, okay, your home has been approved, which means they're coming to you. And so we'll see you at 11:30 tonight. Very common for kids to be placed late in the day. And I think a lot of it is because once they remove these children, they go back to the CPS office, from what I can gather, and then they start looking for the home. And they have to go through all these different hoops before they can officially approve a home. So anyway, it was 11:30 at night, found out that it was a little girl. And our kitchen is still in shambles. I mean, we had plastic hanging from the ceiling. And I remember saying to our case manager, are they going to come in here and be like, absolutely not, are we placing this child? And she said something along the lines of like, just explain to them what's going on. That caseworker, the CPS caseworker, I don't think even noticed.
You could have asked her, hey, did you notice anything strange? And she'd be like, no.
Poor thing was probably so tired. It's 11:30 at night. She's bringing this baby from the hospital. Anyway, so she is the tiniest baby I've ever held.
I mean, she was what, 5 pounds?
She was 5 pounds. She was born in a jail and she had been in the NICU for 3 days. And this goes to show you sometimes the unknowns of foster care is we knew her name, but her name could have been said multiple different ways. And so we had no idea how her mama had wanted her name to be said.
Yeah.
And so we gave her a nickname, as we have done with every single child that's come into our home, is given them a nickname.
Well, man, I think that's just a U.S. or Southern thing, is everybody gets a nickname if your name is too long.
That's true. That's true.
If your name is too long or too hard to pronounce, congratulations, your nickname is now Bubba.
Yeah. So we called her Allie. We had sweet Allie for 8 weeks, and then she moved on to be with family.
That's a really sweet story too.
It's a very cool story. I don't know how much of it we're actually allowed to share, but she is exactly where she's supposed to be.
It was a God thing.
Did it hurt when they took her to the other family? Absolutely. Everybody cried. Robby cried, I cried, Avery cried, we all cried. But looking back now, it is so easy to see that is exactly where she was meant to be, and God really had his hand in that. What was it like for you? They always this is probably a good thing. The guardian ad litem, which is the child's attorney, always calls Robby, which is a great thing, right? What was it like for you to receive that call from the guardian ad litem? Which the crazy thing is our placement who just left actually had the same attorney. It's so crazy. It's been, how many years now? 3 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Anyway, what did you think getting that call from the attorney and finding out that she had family?
I mean, it stung a little bit because this was one of those, and, we've learned to take it with a truckload of salt at this point, but sometimes, the caseworker will walk in and be like, yeah, this one's definitely going to adoption. You'll probably be adopting them. And if you don't know any better, you're like, oh, wow, that's amazing.
And that's exactly what happened with her.
And so we were told that. So unfortunately, that was kind of the expectation. We didn't get into this to adopt. we got into this to support children, but also it's a sweet little baby. You know, how can you not just fall head over heels in love with them, you know, and want them to stay forever? And that's exactly what happened here. So it definitely hurt a lot, and it was, you know, it stung for a while. And then, you know, in hindsight, you really see, you know, kind of, you really see the way God moves and how, you know, this unfortunate series of events, you know, and how it's really a blessing for this family. And it was a blessing for us to get to, you know, support and love her while they, you know, they found the family and figured out, you know, if the family, you know, had space or, you know, had the desire to take in this newborn, you know, and to be that loving first stop out of the hospital was really amazing. You know, that's hindsight, of course. You know, in the moment it stung and it hurt and we didn't want her to leave. But now I really see the, you know, the grand scheme of things, just how beautiful, you know, that story is. I mean, we still get contact and pictures on her birthday, and, you know, we even, they were driving through town at one point and, you know, it was like, hey, we're going to be coming through town. You know, you don't want to see her.
Oh, that meant so much.
Yeah, that was really amazing.
It was like maybe 2 weeks after she had left, maybe not even that long. And so, man, and even in that amount of time, she had changed so much.
Yeah.
And I remember we got her out, like they handed her to us, and I picked her up, and she still smiled at us. Like, she's not that she necessarily recognized, I don't remember in baby development when they can recognize faces, but it was like, I don't know what it was, but she smiled at us, and it was kind of like, oh, like everything is right. Like, you are where you're supposed to be. And yes, it's sad that we're going to go home without you, but you are exactly where you're supposed to be.
Amen.
Okay, so that was our first placement. We took a big break. Not a huge break. I was working for the day school at the time.
Yeah.
And so the nursery was watching her, but I also had taken like a maternity leave. And that was really hard at the day school at that point because we're still kind of in COVID times. And anyway, so we decided to at least wait until after VBS in the summertime. And as soon as VBS was over, we were going to open our home. So the end of the school year comes, VBS comes, Amber, my now bestest friend, comes on as the children's director. This is right about the transition of when Jason left, right before Andrew got here. And it was in the middle of VBS, and I just got this nudge. Now, mind you, VBS is crazy at any time, but Amber was not here. She had already planned to go on vacation before she had taken the job. So it's Brenda Weidman and I running this crazy VBS. And I had taken vacation the week before. Anyway, and I get this nudge, like, you need to open your home. Similar to how Pastor T got it. It was just like this feeling, like, you know what? I think you need to open your home. So I remember going to Robby and being like, I think we're supposed to open our home. What was your thought on that? Because I really don't, it's been a blur, but.
Yeah, I don't remember what, I mean, obviously I said yes. I don't remember any of the specifics around that.
Right. So we text our case manager, Sarah, and I just let her know, hey, I think we're going to open our, and she had known we were supposed to open on like Monday or something. And this was a Wednesday. Hey, I think we're supposed to open our home. Can you just open our home for us? She says yes. I left my phone in the pantry of our kitchen here at the church. And I'm walking around and I'm, you know, talking to everybody and checking on volunteers. And I just get this feeling, you should go check your phone. Okay. Sure enough, I check my phone. Our house had been open for, an hour and a half. And I get a text message from Sarah that says, hey, when you get a chance, give me a call. So I call her, and she says that there is a little girl who they're trying to place. She's currently in a foster home, so this is very different from our first placement, and they're trying to transfer her for we don't know why, the reason. Okay. So she's also older. We were told she was 14 months old. Her story was apparently on the news. I never did find it, but she had a tragic beginning to her start in foster care, and was neglected and malnourished. And anyway, so I talked to Robby. We say yes. They end up bringing her to us the next day. But I'm thinking if she's 14 months old and she's neglected and malnutrition, she has malnutrition, or malnutrition is part of her story. What kind of, what size? I'm, pulling down like our 9-month girl clothes and, our 12-month girl clothes. No, she was in the same size as Ave, as our now 5-year-old at the time. And so that was really cool. But because I dressed them alike. Oh my gosh, we had a family vacation to go to after that.
It was July 4th.
July 4th. And those girls matched every single second that they were on that trip. Same PJs.
It was a little ridiculous.
It really was. I remember, Robby, you and Avery went to the ranch or something that weekend, and it was just Lila and I. So again, she had a name. We weren't sure how to pronounce it. And so we gave her a nickname. We called her Lila. And Lila and I went shopping and had so much fun. Anyway, so Lila was with us for, again, 7 weeks, I think. It was just shy of 2 months. As much as we loved Lila, we learned a whole lot about being foster parents through those 7 weeks that we had Lila. This one still gets me because I still feel guilt about Lila, sweet Lila. We had to disrupt placement with Lila. So disrupt placement is similar to what the foster family before us did. They put in notice, which means that the agency or CPS has 30 days to move the child to a different foster home. There were some things going on physically. It was for the safety of Avery and the safety of Robby. She had an attachment to me, but almost a negative attachment, because if Avery were to come near me, she would like lash out towards Avery. And so as hard as it was, because we still loved her so much, she was so happy and was doing so well considering her start. Mm-hmm. It was so difficult. But one of the things is that we have to put everybody in the situation as a priority. Not just Lila, not just Avery, not just Robby, not just me. We have to look at the entirety of the situation. And what Lila needed, we could not give her. Lila needed to be in a one-child home, at least for the time being. And I remember calling our case manager and bawling on the phone. And because we were torn, we had this love for this little girl and could see how well she was doing and see how her, each day she was learning more and more. And also we could see the detriment that it was doing to Avery, mm-hmm. because it was no longer a safe, positive place for Avery. And so that was really difficult. One thing that I do love about our agency is Sarah assured me that this is something that happens sometimes, and she was always very kind about it.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a failure, mm-hmm. to disrupt placement. But, the image that sticks in my mind is Lila had a tendency to scratch and pull hair, mm-hmm. as a kind of lashing out thing. And I remember specifically at one point, she had gotten just an absolute clump of Avery's hair. And the look on Avery's face was just scared, hurt, and just didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of what stuck with me. And I was like, okay, like we've got to do something. And like you said, I do feel guilt. I feel like there's, other things maybe we could have tried, services or something, but this was our second placement. We were still trying to, get to know what the ropes and what was going on. But yeah, it was pretty tough to disrupt that placement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And after she was moved, we still had medical consenter. And so when she had doctor's appointments for about a week, I had to take her to one of these doctor's appointments because there was an overlap, and this new foster family did not have medical consenter rights, I guess is what you would call them. We did. And so I remember going to pick her up for this appointment from this new foster family's house. And when I called, our case manager told us that this family was wanting to disrupt already, and that there was a possibility that Lila would be coming home with us that night. And part of me was also torn. Like, I'm excited to have her back because we did love her, but also, like, what is this going to do for Ave? And so I got to the doctor's office, I got to the foster family's house, and I opened the door, and she came running and hugged me around the knees. And so I was like, come on, sister. And she, oh, sweet baby, she loved to eat, and she loved peanut butter sandwiches so much. And so she had just eaten solid food for the first time once she went to her first foster home. So when she was, oh, by the way, she was not 14 months old when she came to us. She was 16 months old, closer to 17 months old. She came into care at 14 months, and she had just had solid food when she entered that foster home. She started walking in that foster home. Anyway, so she loved peanut butter sandwiches. And so I had packed her a peanut butter sandwich and some goldfish just in case, because I knew that the appointment could take a little bit longer. I got her in the back of the car, and I was eating my sandwich, which was my lunch. And I look back, I'm like, Lila, you want some sandwich? And that little girl put down a whole peanut butter sandwich and some goldfish. And we went to this doctor's appointment, and it was a long doctor's appointment, and there was a whole mix-up where they couldn't do what they needed to do anyway. But she and I spent 2 hours together. She fell asleep on my shoulder, and it was like, in that moment, I was like, if she comes home with this tonight, I don't know that I can disrupt again. Like, this hurts. So I took her back to her foster home, and as I opened the door, her foster family welcomed her back in with open arms. And I learned that she was going to stay there. And so that, again, it just was like a roller coaster of emotions. It was hard to leave. She was bringing me every single toy that she had been given at this foster home to show me. She had this book that had ABCs and Sesame Street, and she brought that to show me. And then she would go back and she would bring me like a stuffed animal. And then she went back, and then she brought me a little piano looking thing. And I remember leaving, and when I went to put my hand on the door, she was across the room, came running, and was hugging my knees again. And I remember bending down and giving her a big hug and telling her, I love you so much, and I'll always love you, but you are going to do so well here. And of course, I don't think she understood what I was saying, but I think I needed to say that. I needed that for me. You're going to do so well here, and these people love you so much too. And because I knew at that point that we probably would not see each other again. And I handed her back to the foster mom, and they went to go play, and I walked out the door, and I could hear her crying. So they came out and they waved goodbye, and everything was fine. But I remember being on the way home and just crying the whole way home. Thank you. Because I didn't know if we had done the right thing. Now, I knew this foster family could take care of her. I had no doubt in that at all. And in fact, she's been adopted by them, which is so wonderful. But it just goes to show you that there are ups and downs when it comes to foster care. And the downs that make you question, like, why do we do this? Why do we put ourselves through this? And then you remember, like, the kids that you've had in your home, and you see where they're at now, and you realize, like, this is why we do this. Whew.
And I really think it's a timing thing too. You know, having Avery being just a couple of months older than her and dealing with, you know, that kind of thing was really tough on her. Mm-hmm. And really tough on me, at least, to watch. I know it was tough on you to watch as well. And the funny thing is, now I look back on the situation, and, you know, we've got Avery, who's 5 now, who would absolutely understand what was going on. Mm-hmm. You could sit down and explain it to her. And then you've got Beckett, who is 2, wouldn't really understand it, but he's a boy, and he roughhouses. And I feel like if we'd had a boy mm-hmm. at the same time as we'd had Lila, it might have been different. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, boys play a little bit rougher. They're rough and tumble, you know, like, you know, I almost wonder, you know, like it was just a timing thing, you know, like it just.
Right. But you know what? Pastor T actually really helped me understand, because I remember going to her before I called the case manager and bawling, saying, I think we have to disrupt placement. And she told me, you have done what you need to for this little girl. She's been put into your life for a reason, so that you could help figure out the things that she needs. So
well, then we also, you know, figured out that she had some medical stuff. She needed to be bumped a level of care.
Yeah.
You know, like,
so there are 3 levels of care right now in the state of Texas. There's basic, which is what every child comes in as most of the time, unless there's a medical issue. There's moderate, and then there's specialized. And so she was basic, but she needed to be bumped. We found that out. And I don't even want to give us all the credit and say, oh, we did this and we found this out. But it was in our home that we realized that she couldn't hear. And so that was why her speech was affected. She was dealing with some other issues. And so because I was working part-time, I had the time to take her to these appointments and to call and get her in on these appointments when that may not have been the case if it was for a different family. And so that was really hard to disrupt. But when you look back, you go, okay, she was in our life for a reason, and we were in her life for a reason. Again, a stepping stone to get her where she's in her forever family. Yeah. And she's doing really well. So again, highs and lows, but it's really easy when you look back to see where God's hand was. Not in the moment, but.
And I think also it was a learning experience for me, at least. I was very nervous about that 4th of July vacation, about the way some people in the family would react. And it was night and day to what I was expecting as to what really happened. They welcomed her with open arms and treated her just like another one of the family. And that was really amazing for me to see, you know, and to learn like, oh, okay, like we're on board with this. You know, there's people that they understand that it takes a village, and they're happy to be part of that village.
Right. Exactly. Then we took a big break.
Very big break.
Because then came Beckett Sarvis.
I was going to say, and then we had another child.
Yes, we did get pregnant, and we had Beckett, and we had kind of said that, okay, once Beckett is 1.5 years old, then we'll look into getting recertified, because at that point we had A, moved homes, and B, it had been so much time that we were going to have to recertify anyway.
Yeah, all of our certifications had lapsed, all the trainings, everything.
This time it took us longer because we had 2 kids. There's just a lot more going on, but we did about the same time get recertified, and this one was so different. Talk about how we opened our home this time and how different it was.
I just remember specifically going through. So it had been so long we had to redo the orientation, which this time was in person, not over Zoom. Yeah. And you know, we walked into this, and our previous case manager,
who has
now been promoted, is in charge of case managers, was just so excited to see us, gave us each both big hugs, and was just like, oh man, it's so good to see y'all. I'm so happy y'all are here. And, you know, I had been harboring a little bit of guilt about the fact that, like, you know, A, we had disrupted the last placement we'd had. B, it's been, you know, 2 years since we'd last fostered or done anything like this. Like, you know, what's going on? And she was just so excited to have us there. And it was really cool. Like, she was drawing on our experiences in the trainings, and like, okay, you know, and describing stuff, and then, you know, asking, you know, one of us to elaborate on, you know, some point she was trying to make. And so it was really cool to be able to like help.
It made you feel like she cared, and she remembered, like she cared enough to remember these instances, because, you know, they have families, lots of kids, and she remembered and just made us feel like we had never been gone. I really loved that too. But I was more talking about like after we opened our home. So with Allie, the day we got approved, we got a call.
Oh yeah, this part. Okay, yeah.
So then we're expecting like, okay, we waited till after our Disney vacation. We're like, okay, we're going to open our home on the 5th of February. We're probably going to have a baby within that week. Like, that's how crazy it is. Fact. It's not a fun fact. I was going to say fun fact. It is not a fun fact.
It's an unfun fact.
It is an unfun fact. There are 400,000 kids in foster care in the United States alone right now. And so there's also in lots of places, a lack of foster parents. And so that is why we were expecting like, okay, we're going to have a call really soon. Anyway, we open our home on February 5th, and
crickets,
which is a good thing. It's a good thing. And if you watch the podcast at all, we talked about it a couple times, Pastor T and I, about how we were still waiting. And I was feeling really torn about it because I'm on one hand kind of discouraged. We had this plan. We were going to have another child in our home to, add to the family even for a little bit of time. And
we'd gone through all these trainings. We'd done all this work. We were ready to go.
Yeah, to wait. But waiting is a good thing because it means that there are not children that need to be removed from their homes.
Yeah.
Anyway, a whole month later, we get a phone call for a little boy, and he has Down syndrome. And we had been told that if it was a newborn baby, they were just going to go ahead and submit our paperwork, submit our home, because they knew that those kids, if a newborn baby comes up, they can come to the Sarvis house. And I got a call from our new case manager, and she said, I'm calling you because this is a little more complicated. This little boy, and she goes on, he's been in the hospital for this long. He is a newborn. And the last thing she says is, and they are pretty sure has Down syndrome. And so I said, okay, let me call Robby, because I have learned now. Let me call Robby. Meanwhile, I'm asking, what's the visitation schedule like? Was he exposed at all to drugs? All these different questions. So I call Robby, and I'm expecting that Robby is going to say no, and I am okay with that. And I told him, I'm calling you, but I want you to know before I tell you that I am okay if we say no. I'm okay if we say yes, and I'm okay if we say no. And I am very sad to tell you that I am no help in this decision because I am torn. And so I tell him, and I do the same thing that the case manager does, Nicole, and I say, and lastly, they think he might have Down syndrome. And what did you say?
I don't remember the exact words, but I thought about it for a minute, and I realized that, if he's supposed to be in our house, then it will happen. We got into foster care to take care of kids, to help kids, and, that we needed to say yes.
So we did. So we said yes.
We said yes.
And for a day and a half, they're like, okay, your house has been approved.
Yeah. Get ready. He's coming.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh my gosh.
She's pulling boxes down, getting bottles out, getting
running
ready
to the store to buy preemie diapers because we don't know what size diapers he's in. I don't know what formula he's on yet. And I'd asked if I could pick him up from the hospital, which in the state of Texas, DFPS has to release them to your care in your home in most cases. So that was not a possibility.
Which is annoying because when you pick up a baby, you really want to have that conversation with a nurse to figure out what's he's doing, what the baby's doing, what the propensities are, how much formula, what kind of formula.
But we've kind of learned that is the discharge paperwork is kind of it's a privilege.
Yeah.
Because anyway, a lot of times you don't even get that. You get, here's a child. Anyways.
We're not even sure what their birthday is.
Exactly. So, they said, well, we'll let you talk to the NICU nurse. So the NICU nurse calls me and she says, hi, I am from Bay Area. Bay Area. Thank you. Bay Area Medical Center. And I'm like, what? So she starts going through you're taking home a newborn. They're allowed to have pacifiers. Sometimes babies get hiccups. Never lay your baby on their tummy to sleep. And I'm like, okay, she has to go through all this paperwork. So while she's saying all this, I'm Googling where is Bay Area Medical Center and realize that it is in Corpus Christi.
Yeah. So for those of y'all, we're in New Braunfels.
Yes.
You're about as far. The closest bay is going to be on a lake.
Yes. So I quickly text my case manager while this poor NICU nurse is still reading me all this paperwork and say, where is this baby? And then she realizes. And what we think happened is all 4 of the children that we've had have been from Bexar County. Bexar. B-E-X-A-R, Bexar County. Bexar County. This baby was from Bay Area. Bay Area and Bexar in a tense and fast situation sound exactly alike.
Also over a cell phone call of questionable quality.
Right, exactly.
You could it's a stretch, but I could see Bay Area coming out bare.
And a lot of times you're speaking over text messages, and so if it got mistranslated with one person and they're saying Bay, it can anyway. So it turns out after we've been preparing for this baby that he is in Bay Area, and although we would have I would have. Robby would have been like, Mallory, you're crazy. I would have. Nicole, our case manager, said, I'm going to go ahead and disrupt this placement because I know that y'all will try. Or Sarah says that y'all will try and do this, but it is not feasible for y'all.
It's like a 5-hour drive.
I know. Anyway, there was visitations at least once a week, sometimes twice.
Twice a week because it's a newborn.
Yes. So anyway.
20 hours a week in the car.
Yes, I know. It would not have been feasible. So we're crushed. Mostly we're crushed because that baby, they had been trying to find a placement for this baby and could not find one.
Yeah, they couldn't.
And so
find
here's
somebody to
another
take her.
night in the hospital for this sweet baby who just needs someone to love on him. Goodness gracious. So anyway, 2 days later, we get another call. And this is a short story because it was a short placement, but we got a little girl who was 3.5 months old, the happiest, smiliest little baby you had ever seen. You would never know the things that this little girl had been through if you just looked at her. I mean, she was so happy. So she was only with us for 4 days, and she unexpectedly was moved to be with her sister, which, again, stinks for your heart because in the 4 days that she was there, we already fell in love, already went shopping. I mean, like, the second day, Avery, me, and Natalie was this baby's name, also kind of a nickname, we're shopping at Target.
Well, yeah, and I think it also stinks for that placement because we're licensed for 2, and she had a sister that was just outside of the range.
Like our range is 0 to 2, and this little girl was over 2. And so instead of calling to see if we would take the 2-year-old, even though we had said when she was dropped off that we would take the 2-year-old should that need arise.
It didn't get communicated because the
happens.
case manager or the caseworker that dropped her off wasn't the caseworker on the case, and just
so
they're busy. There's a lot going on, and
I'm sure she's where she needs to be.
yeah, exactly. It's a God thing.
Yeah, we still think about her though all the time.
Yeah, she was so smiling, cute.
She was. And then we waited again. And a God thing, I was listening to a podcast, and the podcast was the Bible recap, which I talk about on this podcast all the time. And it is a good one. She was talking about praying the big prayers. Like, don't just bring God your little prayers, bring him your big prayers and your big requests. And so I was like, God, if this is supposed to happen today, please resolve the issue, number 1. And if there is a child in need, let them come here. At 12 p.m. or 12:30, I get a text message from our case manager, Nicole. The issue has been resolved. There's prayer number 1 answered. At 7:30, Robby is playing in the band that week, so we're both at band practice. I get a text message from Nicole. Hey, we have just submitted your home for a baby boy who is 3 weeks old. Why are you making that face?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay.
Sorry, I got confused between the one prior to that and then.
Yes, 3 weeks old. And then at 11:45 that night, here came our sweet little Eli, who it is again a nickname. And if you have been around the church in the last 6 or 7 weeks, you've probably seen him either strapped to me or me pushing a car seat or Robby carrying a car seat, or, they just kind of, one thing that we do is they become a part of our family and our daily routine. If we're going to the church, we're all going to the church.
You got to keep up.
Yes, exactly. So this one's still really fresh. He just went to be with his brother 3 days ago. And this one is different because we knew it was coming, but it doesn't mean that it made it any less hard. Yeah. And in fact, I was telling Robby last night, the crazy thing is that we had Natalie for 4 days. We had Eli for 7 weeks. We had Lila for 7 weeks. We had Allie for 8 weeks. And every single time one of them left, it was the same amount of heartbreak. Yep. It still hurts exactly the same.
Even when you know it's coming.
And even if it's only been for 4 days. Because these kids come into your life and you give them your all to watch them thrive and grow, and you give them all the love that you have, including, I love these kids as much as I love my own biological children, and that's really not something I thought I would ever say, to be very honest.
Well, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do.
That's what we're called to do, and you just kind of wonder, is that something that's ever going, people say that, but do they really mean it? No, they mean it. And so It hurts and it's really hard. But every single time, I'm like, this is why we do this. It sucks. Why do we do this to ourselves? Well, we do it because we're called to do it and because we love these kids. And even if they're with us for 4 days, even if they're with us for 24 hours, we want to give them everything we can in that 24 hours, 4 days, 7 weeks, whatever it might be. And we're still going to pick up the pieces when they leave, but we want to give them everything we can while they're with us because that's how they grow and that's how they learn what attachment is. And the way that we explain it to our 5-year-old, which this has gotten harder because now that Avery understands things, when we break, she also breaks.
Yeah.
Like she cried when Allie left, but I think also a lot of it was like just kind of a confusing, like, why is everybody crying? But with this last one, with Eli and with Natalie, she broke. And that was hard to watch.
Yeah.
Kind of made you go, why do we do this? Why are we doing this to our kids?
It feels different because when she picks up the pieces and when she calms down, she sees it. Mm-hmm. She understands why we do it, why we go through this every single time. She understands that, you know, this is something that we've been called to do, is to help these other people, to help our community, to help our, you know, all the kids. You know, God says, take care of the orphans and the widows.
These kids are orphans in this time of their life.
Yeah, exactly. They need somebody to lean upon. They need an older sister to help look out for them, look after them. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean,
that's how we explain it to her.
It does hurt to watch her break and, you know, her, but I see the resiliency when she takes that deep breath and she looks at you. You can see that she understands why. Mm-hmm.
And then the next morning when you go to get in the car and you say, Ave, do you want to move because we are taking a break, at least for about a month. We said, Ave, do you want to move your car seat up to where the baby was? And she says, no. And I said, oh, do you like sitting back there? She said, no, I just want to make sure that the next baby has a place to sit. And the night before she had broken, we had all broken. And so I said, so do you still want to be a foster family? And she said, yeah, I still want to help foster kids. And I said, well, what do you think our job is as foster families? And she said, my job is to be a big sister. And I said, that's exactly right. We are a family to these kids. Whether they're with us for only a little bit of time, we're supposed to treat them like family. That's what Jesus tells us to do. And she does a really good job of that. And Beckett will do a good job of that too. When Eli left, this is not funny, but when Eli left, you know, I'm crying and Robby's very somber and Avery's kind of understanding what's about to happen. And so I said, Beckett, do you want to say goodbye to Eli? And Beckett's over there playing with the fire truck and he's like, bye, Eli.
He's like, see you tomorrow, dude. It was fun.
And it took until yesterday. I picked him up. At one point we were standing next to the car seat, which we keep in a certain spot in our house. And he's like, where did Eli go? I'm like, oh, buddy, Eli's with his brother. He's with his new family. And we'll have to explain that. We had to do that with Avery a lot too after Allie left.
Well, they just, forget.
And so it's hard, but there's definitely a reason that we do this. So, okay, we probably need to wrap this up, but I do want to ask you.
I just want to say that Eli, while he's with us, gained over 3 pounds.
Yes, let me tell you. See, very proud. I mean, it's a thing to be proud of, you know, because we give them all that we can, including our sleep, so that we can get them up in the middle of the night and feed them.
That's the thing, right? Like he was headed down that slippery slope
of failure to thrive.
Failure to thrive, which we had the same thing with Beckett. And what it takes is just commitment of we've got to get up every 2 hours in the middle of the night and make them eat. And then once they get back on that schedule and they start eating better and more regularly, then you can, back off and give them longer stretches at night. Mm-hmm. But I am proud of that, the fact that we were able to help him through that and, get him over that and just help him, because that pushes him towards success.
Right. And although, again, at this point, when we're hurting and when we're still heartbroken, we can go, this is why God put him in our house, because we had seen this before in our biological son and knew what needed to be done.
And we caught it earlier.
We caught it early. We said, you know what, we're going to take him to, it was also a God thing. Let me just say one more thing before we finally wrap this up.
One more thing.
And another thing. Our old pediatrician did not take Superior Health, which is what foster children receive. And we were realizing as we had Eli that there was something going on, and it was very similar to what Beckett was going through. We were having like this deja vu moment.
Tummy troubles.
Yes. And we get an email from ABCD Pediatrics. ABCD Pediatrics now takes Superior Health. Do you know I called that same day because Robby told me to?
I told her, I was like, do it.
To get in with our doctor that we used with Beckett. And it was amazing.
And she's not at the ABCD in our town. She's down
in San Antonio, but
she did such a good job of helping us figure out Beckett and listening to us and helping us with Beckett. They were like, congratulations, you get to see another one.
And she did the same thing for Eli. And so it's a proud moment to go, yes, he's gone to be with his family, and we are so happy for him to get to grow up with his brother. Mm-hmm. But when we're hurting, it helps us to know that while he was with us, these are the things that we could do to help him so that he, again, has a better start. So, okay, as we wrap up, I want you, Robby, to please tell our listeners what is the one advice you would give to someone who is thinking about getting involved in any way in foster care.
Can I do two?
Sure, but the camera battery is blinking. So.
Oh, no. Okay, I'll do it quickly. First one is always communication is key. Everyone always says that. It is very important when you're fostering as well, even more so because life is crazy and life is hectic, and then you add on a new baby on top of that. So just make sure you have very open and transparent communication, and don't be afraid to tell each other the hard things. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling. I need a break. I can't, I need more than 4 hours of disjointed sleep tonight, please.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And then the other thing, you're getting into foster care, be prepared for a lot of paperwork and be okay with that. Like it
is all for it. Sometimes in the moment is a lot.
It is a lot.
But it is going to help you in the long run. It helps more than anything. It helps that child in the long run.
Yeah.
Because when they move on, they've got all those paperwork, all the medical appointments that you went to that they can look at. Because when they come into sorry, I'm stealing your thing.
No, you're good. It's perfect.
When they come into your home and you know nothing about them, not even the right birthday for them, any information that you can collect from a doctor, from a progress log that goes with them is helpful to them and helpful to the foster parent that's going to take care of them, or the family member that's going to take care of them. It is 100% for that child, and I totally get that now. I didn't in the beginning.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It is a lot. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal that.
No, it was perfect. I mean, yeah. It came to me as I was sitting here that's really kind of what I want to like. Hey, the documentation, don't not do it. Also, your case manager won't let you not do it.
Yeah, which is good. If
So you might as well just prepare
they
for
won't
it.
let you not do it. So, all right. Thank you for being on the Unveiled Podcast.
Happy to do it.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope that you're enjoying this series as we kind of show you something that's really important to us. And we hope that it's becoming more important to you and that you are learning something new every single week. But until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.